Jack Morrison's finger froze on the trigger. 3 men, 1 woman, a whole lot of blood in the snow. She was cornered against a massive pine, her back arched like a cat ready to strike. Her dark hair was a mess, spilling over a buckskin dress torn at the shoulder. Through the tear, he could see the curve of her skin, something that had no business mattering when death was this close. But it did. And the way she held that bone-handled knife, blade forward, even with her other hand pressed tight against a wound in her side, that mattered too. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She was waiting. "Just walk away, Morrison," a voice whispered in his head, the same voice that had kept him alive for 6 long years, ever since the grassy ridge at Little Bighorn, the same voice that let him walk while better men bled out on the dirt. But this was different. The wind shifted, and he caught her scent. Sage, smoke, and something wild. Something that made the old shrapnel in his leg ache with a memory of pain. One of the men laughed, an ugly, grating sound that scraped the quiet woods raw. That was it. That was the choice. Jack's grip tightened on his Spencer rifle. He'd learned a long time ago that some choices weren't really choices at all. They were just who you were. And in that moment, Jack Morrison was a man who couldn't walk away. The first shot was clean, just like they taught him at Shiloh. The rifle cracked, a single sharp command that echoed through the pines. The man with the ugly laugh crumpled, a dark hole appearing dead center in his chest. He hit the snow without another sound. The other 2 spun around, their eyes wide with confusion, searching for a ghost in the trees. And that was the only opening she needed. She moved like smoke, a blur of buckskin and fury. The bone-handled knife left her hand in a silver arc, a whisper of steel through the cold air. It buried itself to the hilt in the second man's throat. He gurgled, clawing at his neck, and then he was just another body staining the snow red. The third man was the smart one, or at least the one who wanted to live the most. He dropped his pistol, hands shooting straight up into the air as he backed away, his boots stumbling in the deep powder. "Your choice," Jack's voice boomed from the tree line, the Spencer still leveled. "Walk, or join your friends." The man didn't need to be told twice. He turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush like a panicked deer. Jack waited. He listened until the sound of the man's terrified retreat faded into the whisper of the wind. Only then did he step out from the cover of the pines, his bad leg protesting with every step. The woman had slumped against the tree, the fight finally draining out of her. One hand was still clamped to her side, where blood was now seeping thick and dark through her fingers. Her other hand was reaching, ready to pull her knife from the dead man's throat. She was a survivor. Jack knew the look. Up close, she was even more striking. Fierce, high cheekbones, lips that were full and set in a grim line. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They were dark as a Montana winter night and just as unforgiving. She watched him approach, her gaze tracking him like a hawk. She was looking for weakness, for a threat. She was reading him the same way he was reading her. "You're hurt bad," he said, his voice rough. "I'll live." Her English was good, but it carried the soft, rounded edges of another tongue. Blackfoot, maybe, or Crow. He kept his distance, the rifle held low but ready. "Maybe, maybe not. That fella who ran, he'll be back, and he'll bring friends." She tried to push herself upright, to stand tall again. A sharp gasp of pain escaped her lips, and her legs buckled. She started to fall. Without thinking, Jack lunged forward and caught her arm. Her skin was hot, feverish, even through the layers of buckskin. She looked up at him, her dark eyes a swirling storm of gratitude and fury. He was helping her. She hated that she needed it. Something in Jack's chest, a place that had been cold and dead for years, suddenly shifted. It wasn't a spark. It was more like the grinding of ancient stone. "My cabin's close," he said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "A mile north. You can rest there." She stared at him, her breath coming in ragged pants. The single word she spoke cut through the winter air like a shard of ice. "Why? Why help me? A stranger, an Indian woman, someone the world had already decided was worth less than the bullets in those men's guns." Jack looked from the dead men in the snow to the blood soaking her dress. He looked at the way she held her head, proud and defiant even as she was bleeding out. He thought about the boy at Little Bighorn. He thought about all the times he'd walked away. Because, he said, the truth of it landing heavy in his own gut, some things are just worth doing right. Her name was Ayanna Crowfeather. He learned this as he carefully cut away the torn buckskin, the firelight in his small cabin flickering across her skin. She was half Blackfoot, half Scottish, daughter of a fur trader who fell in love with a chief's sister and paid for it with his life. Widow of a war chief who didn't die in glorious battle, but coughing up his lungs from the white man's sickness. The story came out in bits and pieces as he cleaned the gash on her side. It was deep, but the blade had been clean. It would scar, but she would live. He pressed a clean bandage made from a torn shirt against the wound, and her breath hitched. "Careful," she whispered. Jack couldn't tell if she was talking about the wound or something else entirely. "You're safe here," he said, and they both knew it was a lie. Safe was a town with a sheriff and a telegraph wire. This was a lonely cabin in the middle of a Montana winter. Safe was the last thing it was. She tested the word on her tongue. Safe. A bitter, mirthless laugh escaped her. "I haven't been safe since my husband died." She looked away toward the dancing flames. "Since I failed to give him sons, since the tribe elders decided I carried bad medicine." Her hand moved then, a fleeting, unconscious gesture. It rested for a bare second on her flat belly, a protective motion. Jack saw it, filed it away. He didn't understand it. Not yet. "They cast you out?" he asked, trying to keep the anger out of his voice. "Into the snow? With nothing?" Ayanna's dark eyes met his across the small space. "3 days ago. Those men, they found me this morning. Said they had plans for me." Jack's jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. He'd seen those kinds of plans before. In the war, he knew exactly what desperate men did to women they thought no one would miss. "You killed 2 of them," he said. The words came out flat, hard. "Good." A flicker of something in her expression. Surprise. Maybe even approval. Most white men he knew would be horrified by a woman capable of such brutal, efficient violence. But Jack Morrison wasn't most white men. And then she said the words that turned his world upside down. "You fought at Little Bighorn." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Jack's blood ran cold. The warmth from the fire seemed to vanish. "How did you know that?" "The way you move," she said, her voice a low murmur. "The way you kill. Fast. Clean. No wasted motion. It's soldier's training." She leaned forward, the firelight catching the sharp planes of her face, making her look like a warrior queen carved from stone. "My husband fought there too. On the other side of the ridge. He came back. Changed. We all came back, changed." Jack's voice was a raw rasp. "Those of us who came back at all." Her gaze was relentless. It stripped him bare. "What changed you, Jack Morrison?" The question hung in the air between them, thick and heavy as smoke. He could have lied. He could have deflected, kept the ghosts locked away where they belonged. But looking into her eyes, he found he couldn't. "I shot a boy," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Couldn't have been more than 16. He wasn't even armed. Just a boy, trying to drag a wounded warrior to safety." Jack stared into the fire, but he wasn't seeing the flames. He was seeing a young man's face streaked with war paint, eyes wide with shock and pain. "I panicked," he whispered, "and I put a bullet through his spine." The cabin was silent for a long time. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. Then Ayanna spoke. "War makes killers of us all." She reached across the space between them, her fingers light as a feather as they brushed against the scarred knuckles of his hand. "But not all killers are evil men." The touch was brief, but it seared through him like a shot of cheap whiskey. When she pulled her hand back, he could still feel the ghost of her warmth on his skin. Outside, a wolf howled, a long, lonely cry that seemed to claw at the very foundations of the cabin. Or maybe it was something worse. Jack woke to the sound of shattering glass. He was on his feet before his eyes were fully open, the Spencer rifle in his hands, instinct taking over. Just as he'd predicted, the one who got away had come back with friends. Their voices were rough, jeering, carried on the pre-dawn wind. They were surrounding the cabin. "We know you got her in there, Morrison. Send out the squaw and we might just let you live." Across the room, Ayanna was already moving. She hadn't made a sound, but she was there, a shadow by the hearth, her bone-handled knife gleaming in the dim light. Her face was a mask of calm determination. "How many?" "Mashanur," she whispered, her voice steady. Jack risked a quick look through a crack in the shutters. "6," he breathed. "Maybe 7. More than I was hoping for." He checked his ammunition. 18 rounds for the Spencer, 6 for his Colt. It wasn't enough. Not for a real fight. "There's a root cellar," he said, his mind racing. "Behind the hearth. You could hide." "No!" The word cut him off, sharp and final. She moved to his side, her shoulder brushing his. "We fight together," she said, her dark eyes locking with his. "Or we die together." Something twisted in Jack's gut, a feeling he hadn't felt in a long, long time. When was the last time someone had chosen to stand with him? When was the last time anyone had looked at him like he was worth dying for? He didn't have an answer. "Can you shoot?" he asked, the question gruff. For an answer, she walked over to the corner where his spare Henry rifle leaned against the wall. She picked it up, her hands moving with a fluid, practiced grace as she checked the loading mechanism and sighted down the barrel. "My father taught me," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "before the tribe killed him for the crime of loving my mother." And that's when the first bullet shattered the window above Jack's head. Glass exploded inward, glittering like deadly diamonds in the firelight. Jack didn't hesitate. He returned fire through the broken pane, aiming at the muzzle flash in the darkness outside. A man screamed, a high, piercing sound that was abruptly cut short. Then silence. "5 left," Ayanna said, her voice as calm as if she were counting crows on a fence post. She took up a position at the other window, the Henry rifle resting snugly against her shoulder. They fought like they'd been partners for a decade, not a day. They moved in a deadly, unspoken rhythm. When Jack Spencer ran dry, Ayanna laid down a volley of covering fire while he reloaded. When she needed to shift her position to get a better angle, he fired 3 quick shots into the trees to keep their heads down. The outlaws tried to rush the cabin twice. The first time, Jack and Ayanna dropped 2 of them in the snow before they even made it halfway to the porch. They crawled back, dragging their wounded. The second time, they came from 2 directions at once. A man made it to the door, an axe in his hand, ready to smash it down. Ayanna's shot took him in the knee. He went down howling. But bullets don't last forever. Jack's rifle clicked on an empty chamber just as the cabin door, weakened by the axe blows, finally burst inward. 2 men charged through the opening, pistols drawn, their faces twisted with rage. For a single frozen heartbeat, Jack thought it was all over. He was out of time, out of ammo. Then Ayanna moved. She dropped the empty Henry and flowed across the floor like a panther. Her knife, which she'd tucked into her belt, was suddenly in her hand. She drove it up under the first man's ribs, a brutal, efficient thrust that found his heart. He collapsed on top of her. The second man swung his gun toward her. Jack didn't think. He just reacted. He launched himself forward, a wordless roar tearing from his throat. His bad leg buckled, but he used the momentum, crashing into the outlaw like a runaway train. They hit the floor hard, a tangled mess of desperation and violence. The outlaw was younger, stronger, but Jack was meaner. He'd been fighting for his life since he was 17 years old. His hands found the man's throat and he squeezed. He squeezed with all the rage and fear and pain he'd been carrying for years. He squeezed until the struggling stopped. When the silence finally fell, it was deafening. It was heavier than any sound. Jack pushed himself up, his whole body screaming in protest. His leg was on fire. Ayanna was kneeling by the hearth, pushing the dead man off of her. There was blood on her dress, on her face. None of it was hers. Her eyes were wide, the pupils blown out with the adrenaline of combat. "Is it over?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Jack limped to the broken doorway, rifle in hand, and peered out into the gray pre-dawn light. 3 bodies lay twisted in the snow. The others were gone, vanished. No movement in the trees. No sounds but the wind sighing through the pines and the distant caw of a raven coming to feast. "It's over," he said. He turned back to her. They stared at each other across the wreckage of his cabin. Her hair had come completely loose, a wild cascade of black silk around her shoulders. The buckskin dress was torn even worse now, revealing the elegant line of her collarbone, the rise and fall of her chest as she fought to catch her breath. And Jack felt a surge of desire so powerful, it almost knocked him off his feet. It was raw, unexpected, and completely insane given that they were standing in a room with two dead men. But he saw it in her eyes too, a darkness that mirrored his own, a hunger. When she stood up, her movements were slow, deliberate, hypnotic. "We're alive," she said. It wasn't just a statement, it was a revelation, a miracle. "Yeah," Jack's voice was hoarse. "We are." She crossed the space between them. Every step was a decision. When she reached him, she didn't say a word. She just placed her palm flat against his chest, right over his hammering heart. He could feel the slight tremor in her hand. "I thought I would die today," she whispered, her gaze locked on his. "You didn't." "Because of you," she breathed. Her thumb moved, tracing the rough fabric of his shirt, a simple touch that set his skin on fire. "Because you chose to fight for me." Jack caught her wrist, his grip gentle but firm. Her pulse was a frantic bird beneath his fingers. "Ayana," her eyes darkened. "Do you want me?" The question was a blade, direct, honest. It cut through all his defenses, all the walls he'd built around his heart. Of course he wanted her. He'd wanted her from the moment he saw her, proud and unbroken, ready to face death with a knife in her hand. But wanting was one thing. A man like him, a man with so much blood on his hands, he didn't have the right to touch something so fierce and beautiful. "It's not about wanting," he managed to say, the words feeling like a lie. "Then what is it about?" He could have given her 100 reasons. The danger, the world that would never accept them, his own broken soul. Instead, he spoke the only truth that mattered. "I don't deserve you." A smile touched her lips then, the first real smile he had ever seen from her. It transformed her face, chasing away the shadows and replacing them with a light that stole his breath. "Good thing," she murmured, "that I'm not asking what you deserve." She rose on her toes, her lips brushing against his ear, her warm breath sending a shiver down his spine. "I'm asking what you want." And when she kissed him, what was left of Jack Morrison's careful control finally shattered into a million pieces. They came together with the raw desperation of two people who had stared into the abyss and chosen to live. His hands shook as he fumbled with the laces of her buckskin dress. It fell away, revealing skin the color of warm honey, glowing in the firelight. Her body was lean and strong, a testament to a hard life, but it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Her fingers were sure and steady as she unbuttoned his shirt, her palms mapping the landscape of his scars. A bullet from Gettysburg, a blade mark from a saloon brawl in Dodge City, the deep, puckered groove over his heart where shrapnel at Antietam had almost ended his story before it began. "So many battles," she whispered, her lips trailing a line of fire across his collarbone. "Too many," he rasped. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the elegant curve of her cheekbones. The firelight danced in her dark eyes. "What about you? What battles have you fought?" She didn't answer with words. Instead, she took his calloused, scarred hand and guided it downward, pressing his palm flat against her lower belly. The gesture was tender, protective, full of a meaning that hit him like a physical blow. And suddenly Jack understood. The unconscious gesture he'd seen before. The tribe casting her out for bringing bad medicine. It all clicked into place. "You're with child," he breathed, the words more an accusation than a question. "3 months." Her voice was barely a whisper. "My husband's child. The son I was supposed to give him." Jack's hand stilled on her stomach. A new kind of rage, cold and sharp, pierced through the haze of desire. "They cast you out while you were pregnant?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "They said the child would be cursed, born of a woman who brings death." Her voice broke on the last word. "Maybe they were right. Maybe I do bring death wherever I go." "No." Jack's voice was fierce, a low growl. He pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her, holding her tight. You don't bring death. You fight it. You bring life. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. You fought beside me today. You saved my life. That's not death, Ayana. That's strength. He kissed her again, but this time it was different. It wasn't hunger, it was reverence. A tenderness he thought had been burned out of him years ago. They moved together slowly, carefully, his body worshiping hers, acutely aware of the fragile, secret life she carried within her. He whispered promises against her skin, promises of safety, promises of a future, promises he wasn't even sure he could keep. And when she arched against him, crying out his name like a prayer, he felt something inside his chest that had been frozen for years finally, painfully, break apart. Afterward, they lay tangled in his bedroll, the fire burning down to glowing embers. Her head was on his shoulder, his fingers idly stroking her long, dark hair. The cabin was a wreck. The bodies of the outlaws were still outside in the snow. But in that small circle of warmth, the world felt still. What happens now? Ayana asked, her voice soft against his skin. Jack stared into the dying flames. The smart thing would be to take her to the nearest fort, find her a way back to whatever world she came from. The safe thing would be to let her go, to guard what was left of his heart against another loss. But as he looked down at her, at this fierce, beautiful woman who had fought beside him and was carrying a child against all odds, he realized he was tired of being smart. He was tired of being safe. Stay, he said, the single word holding the weight of a lifetime. Stay here, with me. She lifted her head, her dark eyes searching his. You want that? A woman with a past? A child that isn't yours? His arm tightened around her. I can't promise you much, Ayana. This life, it's hard, it's dangerous, but I can promise you this. You'll never have to face it alone again. She was quiet for so long, he thought she might have fallen asleep. Then she spoke. I dreamed of you, she whispered. What? Before I met you. The night before the tribe cast me out, I had a dream of a scarred white warrior with sad eyes who would save me from the snow. She met his gaze, a hint of a smile on her lips. I didn't know if it was a prophecy or just a desperate wish. Jack traced the line of her jaw with his thumb. Maybe, he said, his voice thick with emotion, it was both. As dawn broke, painting the shattered window with shades of gray and pink, Ayana asked the one question he had been dreading. Will you tell me about him? The boy you killed. Jack's body went tense. But he didn't pull away. He couldn't. If what they had was real, it had to be built on truth. Even the ugliest parts. His name was Running Bear, he began, the name a ghost on his tongue. 16, maybe 17. He was a beautiful kid. The kind of boy who should have grown old, told stories to his grandchildren by a winter fire. Ayana listened, her hand resting on his chest, feeling the tension in his muscles. He wasn't fighting, Jack continued, his voice flat and dead. He was trying to save a friend, dragging a wounded warrior off the field. But I saw the war paint, the movement, and I just reacted. A soldier's reflex. By the time I realized my mistake, it was too late. He was already dying. The cabin was silent. Ayana's voice, when she finally spoke, was gentle. Did he forgive you? The question blindsided him. What? Before he died, did he look at you? Did he say anything? The memory surfaced, something he had buried so deep he'd almost convinced himself it never happened. The smoke, the screams, the dust, and the boy's eyes. He did look at me, Jack's voice broke, right at the end. And he smiled, just a little, like he understood. The confession was a ragged whisper, like he was telling me it was all right. Ayana propped herself up on one elbow, her face close to his. She brought her hand up to his cheek, her touch incredibly soft. Then maybe, she said, her voice full of a grace he knew he didn't deserve, it's time you told yourself it's all right too. And when she kissed him then, it tasted of absolution, of redemption, of the impossible, fragile promise that even the most broken things could somehow be made whole again. But that wasn't the whole story. As the days turned into weeks, a new unspoken tension grew between them. Jack noticed the way she clutched the small leather pouch she wore around her neck. She never took it off, not even when she bathed. And he couldn't shake the image of one of the dead outlaws. On the man's wrist, partially hidden by his sleeve, had been a brand. A small, simple cross. A brand Jack knew all too well. It was the mark of his old army unit, the 7th Cavalry, a deserter. What was a Custer deserter doing running with a gang in the Montana wilderness? One evening as they sat by the fire, he finally asked, "Ayanna, what's in the pouch?" She froze. Her hand flew to her neck, covering the leather bag. "It is nothing. Just keepsakes." "Those men weren't just after you," Jack pressed gently. "The one who ran, he shouted something before the shooting started. He said, 'Give us the seeds.'" Her face went pale. The carefully constructed piece of the last few weeks shattered. She took a deep breath and pulled the pouch over her head. With trembling fingers, she opened it and poured the contents into her palm. Seeds. They looked like ordinary kernels of corn, but they shimmered in the firelight with an unusual, almost golden hue. "This is all that is left of my people," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Not the people who cast me out, the people before them. For generations we cultivated this corn. It is strong. It can grow in the hardest soil, survive the coldest winter. It is the future, our future." She looked at him, her eyes burning with a fierce light. "My husband, his land was the only place this corn would grow. After he died, the new chief wanted the land. He wanted the seeds. He made a deal with a white man, a land baron named Silas Croft. Croft wants to control all the grain in this territory. With this corn, he could." Now it made sense. The deserter. Croft was probably hiring ex-soldiers, desperate men, to do his dirty work. "They tried to take them," she whispered. "When they cast me out, they took everything. But I went back. I snuck into the storehouse in the dead of night, and I took what was mine. What is my child's by right?" This changed everything. She wasn't just an outcast. She was a fugitive, carrying the key to an entire region's future. Their little cabin wasn't a refuge. It was a target. But even that wasn't the final secret. A week later, a lone rider appeared in the distance. Not an outlaw. He was an old man from Mayana's tribe. He carried a white banner of truce. His name was Stone Buffalo, an elder who had been her husband's friend. He came with a warning. "The chief's son, Black Moon, he is the one who made the deal with Croft," the old man explained, his face a mask of sorrow. "He is the one who told them where to find you." He paused and looked at Ayanna, his eyes full of pity. "There is more. A truth that must be spoken. Your husband, Swift Bear, he did not die of the coughing sickness." Ayanna swayed on her feet. Jack reached out and steadied her. "The night he died," Stone Buffalo continued, his voice low, "he had discovered Black Moon trying to force himself upon you while you slept. Swift Bear fought him. Black Moon struck him down with a stone club and made it look like the sickness took him in the night." The air left the cabin. The world seemed to stop spinning. "Then, the child—" Jack couldn't finish the sentence. Ayanna looked at him, her face a canvas of pure agony, and the final, most terrible truth was revealed in her eyes. "Black Moon told the council I was cursed, that my womb was barren," she said, her voice a dead, hollow thing. "It was a lie. He knew. He knew the child I carried was his. The exile, the bad medicine, the bounty hunters. It was all a lie. A monstrous, intricate lie to cover up a murder and an assault, orchestrated by the chief's own son. She wasn't just a fugitive. She was the sole witness to a crime that could bring down a chief, and she was carrying the evidence inside her. The child wasn't a blessing from her dead husband. It was a brand, a constant, living reminder of his murder." Jack looked at her, at the unimaginable weight she had been carrying. He looked at her belly, where an innocent life was growing, a life conceived in violence but now a symbol of survival. He could walk away. Right now. This wasn't his fight. This was a tribal matter, a darkness he had no part in. The voice in his head, the one that had kept him alive for 6 years, was screaming at him. Run. He looked at Ayana's face, stripped bare of all defenses, and he saw not a victim, but the strongest person he had ever met. He stepped forward and gently took her hand. He brought it to his lips and kissed her knuckles. Then he looked her straight in the eye. His name is not Black Moon, Jack said, his voice quiet but as hard as iron. His name is Father, and he will never ever touch you or this child again. This is our home now, and I'll burn the whole world down before I let anyone take it from you. In that moment, the soldier who had lost his way at Little Bighorn was gone. In his place stood a man who had finally found a reason to fight, a man who had found his hill to die on. And it wasn't a place, it was a person. 6 months later, during the worst blizzard the mountains had seen in a decade, Jack Morrison delivered his own daughter. The baby came fast and furious, as if she too was a fighter who couldn't wait to join the world. With the snow piling up against the windows and the wind screaming like a banshee, Jack's hands, the same hands that had taken so many lives, gently, carefully, brought a new one into the world. He wrapped the tiny, squirming girl in the white cotton of Ayana's wedding dress, a simple garment they'd ordered from a Sears catalog and been married in 2 months prior, with only the silent, snow-capped mountains as their witness. She's beautiful, he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. He laid the baby on Ayana's chest. Mother and daughter looked at each other, a moment of solemn, silent recognition passing between them. "What should we call her?" he asked. Ayana's fingers, weak but steady, traced the baby's perfect, tiny features. "Sarah," she said softly, "for the wife you lost so long ago." She paused, then added, "Sarah Running Bear Morrison." Jack's eyes filled with tears. "For the wife you lost and the boy you found peace with." In that one name was a universe of forgiveness, of acceptance, a promise that the deepest wounds could heal, not into scars, but into a kind of wisdom. Spring came early that year, as if the world itself was eager to start fresh. The snow melted into rushing, joyous streams. Wildflowers erupted across the meadow where Jack had built an addition to the cabin. He built a cradle from mountain cedar, and Ayana wove blankets from wool she traded with a passing trapper. They planted the golden corn in a small protected field behind the cabin, and Sarah Running Bear Morrison grew strong and happy in the clean Montana air. The past was never truly gone. Jack knew Black Moon and Silas Croft were still out there. The world was still a dangerous place, but for the first time in his life, he wasn't just surviving in it, he was living. On warm evenings, he would sit on the porch he'd built, his daughter asleep in his arms, and watch Ayana tending her garden. He watched the corn grow tall and strong, a golden promise reaching for the sun. He had found more than love in this forgotten corner of the world. He had found a home. He had found a family. And Jack Morrison, the man who had spent years running from his ghosts, had finally found his peace. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of courage and redemption from the wild frontier. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight.